Welcome to pattern making class. This is Annette Julie, and today we are working on making pant details. So you should have already watched my 5 videos on making the pant trouser draft. And now we're going to work on making assorted details. We're going to start with the real fly front. So grab yourself some pattern making paper and your ruler, and we're going to go ahead and make a real fly front. It's going to go right on the front of this pant here, this draft. Okay, so first off, most zippers that we use on the fly front, if they start at 7 inches, then we're going to need a little bit more paper than 7 inch in length. From the waist down, there's our 7 inches. Okay, normal zipper length. Grab some paper. Go ahead and draw a grain line on it, and we're also going to use it as a fold line. Let's go ahead and fold that. And we are now working on making the fly shield. We can make this 1 inch wide, 1 1/4 inches, 1.5 inches. Those are all your choices. Why don't we go 1.5 inches and have this be substantial? And then beyond that, we will add our 1/2 inch seam allowance. Let's draw the top and draw a 1/2 inch seam allowance beyond that. Now we're going to go down that 7 inches and draw that bottom line. But look, I have a little mark on my paper and I have some room, so I think I'll just go down. If you don't like a little piece of the paper, don't mess with it. Give yourself some more room. There. Now I'm going to go down, so I don't need to use that little piece. There we go, 7 inches. Give myself some seam allowance, 1/2 inch. And now we have drafted the shield. Let's go ahead and cut this out along the seam allowance line. We would have a notch at the top and the bottom, and on this type of draft, the top and the bottom are identical. But for your own frame of reference, feel free to add that on there. And then we need notches right there, right here. Let's give ourselves some U's. Okay, this is going to notch back to the center front. Let's also give ourselves some grain line information. So we have here fly shield, cut 1 self fabric. Okay, now you can also put the date your name. And if this was a flimsy fabric, it could also be interfacing. Only if this is flimsy. You would cut one interfacing. Now let's go ahead and draft the fly facing. Let's get some straight lines going. Half-inch seam allowance. Okay, so we started that, and this is going to be the same length as this one. Okay, including the seam allowance and everything. So we just want to make sure that when you're drafting these, you draft them together and that they come out being matching along the seam line. Let's go down that 7 inches so we can make it matching. And now you have a choice. How wide is it going to be? Well, this one we made 1.5 inches. Okay, so how wide your facing is depends on how wide you want to make a top stitch. So if you want to make a top stitch on the front of the pant that's about 1 inch away from center front, then this piece should only be maybe 1.25 inches. Right? You don't want to make it end up being 2 inches wide. It's not going to work. So decide what that top stitch needs to look like. This is your J top stitch. It looks like this on a lot of pants. It's got that J, and it helps seal your fly front. Okay, so determine that. Then we can base the pattern on your top stitch needs. So my pattern piece is really just 1 inch, and then I have seam allowance on both sides. That's 1/2 inch. And I'm going to go ahead and firm up a curve that I want to use. Also too, this piece can be diagonal. If you want to have a diagonal top stitch line instead of a curved one on the front of your pants, you can do that too, and then the top stitch would follow that line and come up. Okay, so that's your personal choice as a designer. I think I'll make it the curve way, but we know we can angle it. Looks good that way. Let's go ahead and give it a little curve. Now let's add our seam allowance beyond that. Let's also put our grain line right in the middle. And this is our fly facing. Usually this is a cut 1 self fabric. Right, you can write the date. You can write your name. But then you have to decide if you're going to use interfacing. This interfacing is an option. Okay. We'll go ahead and we'll put some notches on it in a second, right after we cut it out. And before I cut that off the top, you can always come and compare it, making sure that it is the same length before you cut off the final piece. And then now we need to put notches on both pieces. Now it doesn't work as well when you just do a single layer. It doesn't really come out, so it's best to do a couple layers of paper with your notcher. And if you don't have a notcher, you can use tips of your scissor. So we have the fly shield, we have the fly facing, and these would get sewn to the front of your pant. And look, they're going to match with the notch there, and then right here above it we'd of course have seam allowance here, and we'd have seam allowance all along here, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. There would also be a waistband up here, and you need to watch another video to do a waistband with me. This is Annette Shui, and it was a pleasure to do a video for you. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.